George Melies was one of the first pioneers in filmmaking history. When the Lumiere brothers astonished the world with their motion picture camera, Melies was at the front of the line to get one. So what makes this old dead French guy so great? Well, in addition to making over 500 films in a little over a decade, he also became known as the father of special effects. That's right, special effects, as early as 1896, using such effects as the stop edit, the dissolve, and the double exposure. What's a double exposure? Well, we'll get into that. But first, let's learn a little bit about who Melies was and where he came from. George Melies was born on December 6, 1861 in France. His father was a wealthy shoemaker and hoped to turn his thriving business over to his children when he retired. Other than the fascination with machinery, Melies had no desire to follow in his father's footsteps. No pun intended. Instead, he shamed his family by becoming a magician, thus proving that teenagers can be just as big of a disappointment to their families in the 1800s as they are here in the new millennium.
My dad wanted me to be an investment banker, but I was like, F that, I want to be in a band.
After selling his half of the family business to his brother, Melies took his money and bought the Theatre Robert Houdin in Paris. After some renovations, he opened his magic shows to the public. When he caught wind of the Lumiere brothers' invention of the motion picture camera, he immediately tried to purchase one. Hey, can I buy that camera?
Nah.
The truth is, the Lumiere brothers saw the moving image as a fad and felt that they couldn't sell one of their cameras to Melies in good conscience. But Melies was a persistent little bugger, so he took his knowledge of machinery and he made one of his own. He would go out and shoot scenes around the city, then play them during his magic shows.
The legend is that he discovered stop motion by accident and editing by accident. He was filming a railroad car or a trolley coming down the street. The camera stopped by mistake. When he got it working again, there was a hearse coming down the street.
When he developed the film, he noticed an omnibus transform instantly into a hearse at the moment where the film was jammed. With this crude mistake, Melies had stumbled across motion picture trick photography. Melies saw the potential in this simple camera trick and went on to master 3 basic special effects: the stop edit, the dissolve, and the double exposure.
Special effects, and you. The stop edit. Well, hello there, Billy. Say, that's quite a lollipop you have there.
Gee, thanks, mister.
But wouldn't you like some celery better?
Jeepers, mister. How did you do that?
Whoa, slow down, Billy. You just said a mouthful. It's actually quite simple. Would you like to try it yourself?
Would I?
That's the spirit, Billy. But first we'll be needing some supplies. A camera, a tripod, and some imagination. Yes, imagination. First, set the camera on the tripod and point it at your subject. Good. Next, start recording. That's right, Billy. After filming for a little while, cut the camera off. Careful, Billy. If you move the camera, the trick won't work. While the camera is stopped, change something in the scene and start recording again. Objects removed will disappear into thin air, and objects you add will appear magically.
Wow, I did it!
Good job, Billy.
How about a light?
Sure thing, Billy. Now you're in flavor country, Billy.
Stop edits were oftentimes used in Melies' films to make objects and people disappear and reappear. Here's a clip from his 1905 film, The Black Imp. Notice his use of stop edits as he battles the chairs. As he gained more experience with motion pictures, Melies started experimenting with more complicated camera tricks.
Special effects, and you. The dissolve. Now that we've mastered the stop edit, let's move on to the dissolve.
Hey, mister, what's a dissolve?
I'm glad you asked, Billy. A dissolve is a gradual transition from one image to another.
Golly, can I try a dissolve?
I don't know, Billy. It's slightly more complicated than the stop edit. Are you up to the challenge?
Am I ever?
Well, you'll be needing those same supplies as before. A camera, a tripod, and as always, some imagination. For this exercise, we're going to make a vegetable dissolve into an ordinary kitchen utensil. First, place the camera on the tripod. Aim it at your subject and roll film. When you stop filming, open the camera and roll the film back about 72 frames. At 24 frames per second, this should allow for a 3-second dissolve. Next, exchange the objects and continue to film. Then sit back and watch the magic happen.
Wow, that's amazing!
Careful, Billy. That's sharp. Now run along and show your friends.
Dissolves were used in Melies' films to fade from one scene to another. He also used them to give the illusion that objects were changing form. In 1904, he made the film The Untamable Whiskers, which featured the dissolve. The final effect discovered by Melies was the double exposure. Using the double exposure, Melies could superimpose one image over another. This became a common technique in filmmaking for creating ghost-like images or adding people or objects to a scene that were not originally there.
Special effects! And you? The double exposure. Billy! Oh, Billy! There you are, Billy. I told you to be careful with that knife.
I don't feel so good, mister.
Maybe learning about double exposure will put some color back in those cheeks. That's the spirit, Billy. But first, let's get some supplies. For this, we'll be needing a camera, a tripod, a cardboard tube, a pair of scissors, a spatula, a half-eaten candy bar, a magic 8-ball, a tennis racket, a calculator, a roll of duct tape, a tube of toothpaste, a coat hanger, and a can-do attitude. Now we're ready to try a double exposure. Pay attention, Billy. This is important. On second thought, Billy, why don't you just set this one out? Similar to the dissolve, a double exposure requires you to expose a strip of film twice. Stand in front of the camera and roll film. Then take 2 steps to the right and expose that same film again. You'll appear in the scene twice. It's that easy. Looks like Billy's got the hang of this one.
I did it!
You sure did, Billy. You sure did.
Melies features the double exposure in his film The Long Distance Wireless Photography. While some of the effects used in Melies' films may have seemed crude and jagged, they have had a major influence on special effects in today's cinema. Improvements in technology have allowed for today's filmmakers to create some pretty spectacular special effects. Though it's rare, you can still find stop edits in some of today's films. Take a look for yourself. In these scenes from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, the director uses stop edits to give the illusion of an instantaneous change of environment.
Where are my boots?
Here's a shot from The Ring using a stop edit to bring the character close to the camera in an instant. This scene from The Grudge also uses stop edits. Unlike stop edits, dissolves are used much more frequently in modern-day films and are primarily used to imply the passage of time between two scenes. Take a look at some dissolves from today's cinema. Dissolves are also commonly used to cut out unimportant information in documentaries. And documentaries have been around since the beginning of films. Like this started popping up more and more as filmmaking became more popular. Year on the playground, I lost my first tooth because I fell off the swing set. I was acquitted of all charges, and it's erased off my permanent record. That is where babies come from. Moving on, the double exposure is still used in some of today's films to superimpose one image over another. Here we can see the Holy Grail being superimposed over a castle using double exposure in the film Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Although the double exposure isn't used much in filmmaking anymore, the split screen was created from the same concept and can be used to achieve the same effect more efficiently. In this scene from Multiplicity, the filmmaker reproduces Michael Keaton's character 4 times on the screen and actually has them interact with each other.
2, 3, 4, 12. 7. Doug, I'd like you to meet 4.
Melies probably had no idea at the time, but his simple camera tricks would be the basis of special effects such as these. Though he had a great impact on the film industry, Melies was never really seen as a filmmaker. He enjoyed magic and entertaining, but failed to keep up with the advances in filmmaking. The presence of simple special effects in motion pictures were appealing to audiences for a while, but as the novelty wore off, Melies didn't work to keep people interested in his films. In 1902, Melies created one of the first science fiction films, A Trip to the Moon. He had planned to release it in America and make lots of money off of it. Unfortunately, some of Thomas Edison's film technicians got their hands on a copy of the film, showed it in America, and reaped the benefits. But Melies would bounce back, wouldn't he? Actually, no. After the novelty of his films wore off, he went bankrupt and spent the rest of his life broke and working in a toy store. Well, I guess all stories can't have happy endings. Though he died forgotten and penniless in 1938, Melies' films can still be found in the deep recesses of Joyner Library. But the influence from his works can be seen in many of today's films.
Get a bunch on.
Did get a bunch.